September 19th, 1944. Thick fog covered the fields near Aricourt, France. First Lieutenant Merwin men of the 37th Tank Battalion held the rim of his Sherman's turret, while his gunner searched through the periscope, trying to see through the grey veil ahead. They had been warned about Panthers, the German tanks with sloped armor that standard American shells could not crack from the front. What Men and his crew did not realize was that their ammo rack held 6 special rounds. That would change how tank battles were fought. These were M93 high-velocity armor-piercing rounds with a hard tungsten carbide core. With them, a medium Sherman could suddenly threaten the Panthers that German crews believed were safe from frontal fire. The shock value of this new ammunition would matter as much as its raw power, breaking the myth of Panther invulnerability and forcing German commanders to rethink their plans. The path to this change started far from France, in American test fields and factories, where scientists and engineers raced to solve a problem that was crippling American armor in Europe. Early in 1944, the U.S. Army faced a challenge it had not expected. The M for Sherman, the backbone of U.S. armored forces, kept meeting German tanks it could not defeat from the front. The Panther, built to answer the Soviet T-34, had a powerful high-velocity 75mm gun and a sloped 80mm front plate set at 55 degrees, making it act like about 140mm of flat armor. That was nearly impossible for American guns to pierce head-on. American intelligence had underestimated both how many Panthers would appear and how tough they would be. By June 1944, when the Allies landed in Normandy, 38% of German tanks in the area were Panthers. Not a handful, but hundreds, many with green crews, yet protected by armor that US tank guns could not penetrate from the front. The 75mm M3 gun on most Shermans in Normandy could not pierce a Panther's front at any range. Shots just bounced off the sloped plate, leaving the Sherman exposed to long-range fire from the Panther's powerful gun, which could kill a Sherman beyond 2,000 meters. Even the newer 76mm M1 gun, arriving in July 1944, struggled. With its standard M60 to armor-piercing rounds, the 76mm could punch through 109mm of armor at 1,000 meters at a straight-on angle. That was enough for Panzer IVs and many assault guns, but not for the Panther's sloped front. The 76mm could penetrate the gun mantlet, but only at very close range, often under 100 meters, which was suicidal against the Panther's long-range firepower. The real problem was not the gun alone, but the ammo it fired. The 76mm program itself had been delayed by slow decisions and late recognition of the problem. The first Shermans with the 76mm gun rolled out in January 1944. These M4A176 tanks reached Britain on April 10, 1944, with 130 delivered for the coming invasion. But American commanders chose not to use them on D-Day. They had several reasons. Crews lacked training time. Having to supply to different ammunition types complicated logistics. And leaders believed the 75mm gun would be enough. That proved to be a major mistake. By early July, Frontline reports from Normandy were grim. On July 2nd, complaints about the 75mm's weakness against German tanks reached General Eisenhower. His reaction showed clear frustration. He had been told the 76mm would handle anything the Germans had. A board met on July 12th and confirmed what crews already knew. Standard American weapons could not defeat Panthers from the front. General Omar Bradley ordered the 76mm Shermans rushed to the front from Britain. On July 25th, during Operation Cobra, 102M for A-176 tanks saw combat for the first time. The first reports were sobering. The 76mm was better than the 75mm, but it still had trouble against the Panther's front at typical ranges. Sherman crews learned to shoot for side hits or the mantlet up close, neither of which was ideal against a tank that could shoot them from far away. The answer would come from materials and physics. By July 1944, U.S. ordnance engineers had developed the T for round, later standardized as the M93 HVAP. High-velocity armor-piercing ammo worked differently from normal armor-piercing shells. The M93 had a very hard tungsten carbide core inside a light aluminum body with a shaped nose. This focused the shell's energy into a small, very dense penetrator while keeping overall weight down. The result was dramatic. The M93 flew at about 1,036 meters per second, compared to about 792 meters per second for the standard M62. That extra speed meant more power on impact. At 1,000 yards, about 914 meters, the HVAP could penetrate about 160 millimeters of armor at a slight angle. Official tests showed that against the Panther's gun mantlet curved cast steel around 100 mm thick on earlier models and later increased to around 120 millimeters Sherman. Crews could achieve reliable penetrations at up to roughly 1,000 meters rather than only at point-blank range. Suddenly, the mantlet became a realistic target, opening a path to beat Panthers without a dangerous close-in sprint. But inventing HVAP was only half the solution. Making enough of it was the other half. Tungsten carbide was a strategic material mostly imported from China, which supplied about 36% of the world's tungsten before the war. Tungsten was needed for many uses: machine tools, armor-piercing ammo in several calibers, hardening armor plate, and other industrial jobs. Demand for HVAP alone cost hundreds of tons per year. Each 76mm HVAP round held around 0.88 kilograms of tungsten carbide. So a Sherman carrying 6 rounds needed nearly 5 kilograms of this scarce resource. China produced roughly 10,000 metric tons of tungsten concentrates in 1944. But that had to cover all allied needs. The US added domestic mining in places like Colorado, Nevada, and California, but supplies were still tight. Germany's tungsten situation was worse. Swedish imports fell off, domestic output was small, and by 1945 factories had to reserve tungsten mostly for critical machine tools, not tank shells. U.S. ordnance had tested HVAP designs since spring 1942, but production at scale began only after the Normandy battles showed how serious the Panther problem was. In July 1944, production of 3-inch HVAP for tank destroyers reached 1,000 rounds. In August, 1,000 rounds of 76mm HVAP were made. September saw small increases. Only in November did output reach about 5,000 76mm rounds a month, rising to around 7,000 per month by January 1945. By March 1945, roughly 33,000 rounds of 76mm HVAP had been produced. This was a major effort, but still far from enough to meet demand. By February 1945, the average 76mm Sherman in Europe had about 5 HVAP rounds total. A Sherman company with 17 tanks might have about 85 HVAP rounds to face German units fielding 30 or more Panthers. The first HVAP shipments reached Europe in August 1944, but their impact at first was limited by bigger tactical problems. The hedgerows of Normandy forced close-in fighting, where German guns could ambush Shermans. German crews learned to use hull-down positions, showing only the heavy turret and hiding the weaker hull. German doctrine favored getting off the first shot from prepared positions, letting Sherman columns move into range before firing at distances where U.S. return shots often could not penetrate. The effect on Sherman crews was severe. Some nicknamed the tank the Ronson lighter, claiming it lit every time it was hit. Post-war studies showed this was overstated, but the fear changed behavior. Many commanders called for artillery or air support instead of engaging Panthers directly, giving up initiative to an enemy that could be beaten with the right ammo and tactics. HVAP began to change this mindset, but slowly, limited by supply and a lack of training on how to use the new rounds best. The first wide combat test of HVAP came not in the hedgerows, but in the open country of Lorraine, where American armored divisions could maneuver more freely. In September 1944, General Patton's Third Army was deep in France, pushing toward Germany with stretched supply lines. The 4th Armored Division had seized a bridgehead near Arcourt. German High Command understood the danger. If Patton's armor reached the Rhine, the Reich's industrial heart would be at risk. General Hasso von Manteuffel's 5th Panzer Army was ordered to counterattack, break the bridgehead, and halt Patton. Two newly formed panzer brigades, the 111th and 113th, were sent in with many Panthers straight from factories. On paper, the Germans had a strong edge, about 150 tanks versus roughly 50 Shermans in combat command. Of the 4th Armored, the 113th Panzer Brigade alone had around 90 armored vehicles, including 40 Panthers and 40 Panzerivs. German leaders expected a quick win. They were wrong. The Battle of Arcourt, fought from September 18th to 29th, became the largest U.S. tank battle until the Bulge, and proved that trained American crews, supported well and using HVAP smartly, could beat technically superior German tanks through better tactics and combined arms. The morning of September 19th opened with thick fog over rolling ground. German scouting was weak. The Panzer brigades advanced without proper reconnaissance into areas held by Americans, who knew the terrain and had set up defenses. Around 8 a.m., elements of the 113th Panzer Brigade broke into U.S. outposts, the German tanks. Brand new Panthers with inexperienced crews advanced in column formation. A serious tactical mistake that veteran Sherman crews exploited. Captain Kenneth R. Lameson's C Company, 37th Tank Battalion, guarded key approaches. His Sherman crews had been briefed 6 HVAP rounds per tank. Save them for Panther turrets or mantlets at ranges where the speed would still punch through. The fog that blinded German scouts helped the defenders. South of the village, a Panther appeared out of the mist at about 75 meters. At that range, the Panther's long-range gun meant nothing. The Sherman gunner fired immediately. The HVAP round, traveling faster than 1,000 meters per second, hit the gun mantlet. The tungsten-core went through the curved steel and set off ammunition beneath the gun breech. The Panther blew apart, its turret lifting slightly from the blast. 2 more Panthers emerged and were destroyed within seconds. The rest turned away, stunned that inferior Shermans could kill them so quickly. Across the sector that morning, similar scenes played out. American tanks used fog as cover to engage at distances where HVAP worked best. German deployment was poor, advancing in column without scouting. Panthers kept showing their thinner sides to U.S. flanking fire. Near the command post, a platoon of M18 Hellcat tank destroyers with 76mm guns and HVAP fought at close range, with deadly effect. By midday, as the fog lifted, forward observers brought in artillery, and P-47 Thunderbolts of the 405th Fighter Group dove through the clouds to hit German armor. With rockets and machine guns, the American strengths fit together, even if a single Panther was superior tank for tank. U.S. units fought as teams with tanks, artillery, aircraft, infantry, and tank destroyers working together. German tanks advanced without enough artillery, without air cover, and without infantry to clear defenses. Against prepared positions, Panthers were destroyed piecemeal despite their engineering advantages. HVAP did not make a Sherman equal to a Panther on a spec sheet. But war is not decided by spec sheets. Tanks are beaten by crews who spot and exploit weak points under real conditions. The Panther's mantlet, needed for the gun to move, was a vulnerability. The joint between turret and hull, the side plates, the engine decal could be hit. With HVAP, Shermans could take shots at ranges that earlier would have been suicidal attempts. The psychological effect on German crews was severe. Panther crews had been told their front armor was safe from American guns. Keep your front toward the enemy and you will be fine, they were told. The first time they saw Sherman rounds smash through their mantlets and set off ammo inside. That belief died. Survivors spread the word. American tanks now had a round that could kill Panthers. By afternoon, German officers were reporting up the chain that U.S. Shermans had some kind of new, more powerful ammunition. Some thought the Americans had brought 90mm tank destroyers or British Fireflies. The truth that U.S. industry had created a special shell that undercut Panther armor was more troubling. It showed American factories could solve battlefield problems faster than German industry could counter them. The fighting carried on through September 22nd, when the main German thrusts finally stalled. US forces had destroyed or disabled about 86 German tanks and assault guns. American losses were about 25 Shermans and 7 tank destroyers. The exchange favored the Americans, even with the Panther's technical advantages. Harcourt was not just a tactical win, but a psychological turning point. US crews learned they could defeat Panthers without waiting for heavy tank destroyers or perfect air support. German crews lost faith in their supposed frontal safety. German reports after the battle were full of confusion and blame. The 113th Panzer Brigade, which entered with about 90 vehicles, had fewer than 20 operational by September 29th. On paper, the Panther was superior. How did brand new tanks with inexperienced crews lose so badly? Training and experience were part of the answer. The Panzer brigades had crews with too little practice. The US crews in the 4th Armored were veterans who knew combined arms and how to use terrain well. But that alone did not explain the penetrations that should have been impossible. With standard American ammo, German officers examining wrecks found small entry holes, pointing to sub-caliber cores. Unexploded rounds near damaged tanks told the story. The Americans were using tungsten-core shells. This had major strategic meaning. Germany had developed similar ammo, the PZGR-40, but lacked the tungsten to make enough. If the Americans could supply front-line tanks with these rounds in meaningful numbers, it meant they had industrial strength and material access Germany could not match. American tanks were more numerous, better supplied, and now had ammo that partly offset German armor advantages. The impact spread beyond Harcourt as word moved through American units that the new rounds could defeat Panthers in the right conditions. Crews became more willing to fight German armor directly. The fear that had grown in Normandy began to fade. Crews still respected the Panther, but they no longer felt powerless. This change in morale mattered for the months ahead. Crews who believed they could win took better positions, shot faster and smarter, and seized chances. Those who felt outmatched hesitated and lost initiative. HVAP, though scarce, gave US tankers a tool for more equal fights. Even crews who never fired HVAP felt better knowing it existed and might arrive when needed most. Commanders had to make tough choices about where the limited HVAP went. Tank destroyers got priority because their job was killing tanks. Shermans, which had to support infantry as well as fight armor, often got fewer rounds even though they met enemy tanks frequently. This created tension between tactical needs and supply limits. The allocation system ran through several levels of command, and that caused uneven results. Some units got more HVAP than they could use right away, while others ran out quickly and had no resupply despite urgent requests. When Germany launched the Ardennes offensive in December 1944, American tank units came under intense pressure again. The Battle of the Bulge brought many Panthers and Tigers into snowy terrain that favored defense, and reduced Allied air help because of bad weather. Sherman crews leaned hard on their scarce HVAP to fight heavy German tanks. The shortage became critical within days. Some units used up all their HVAP and could not get more as supply lines struggled on blocked, threatened roads. Even so, American forces showed again that skill and teamwork could balance technical disadvantage. Tank crews worked closely with infantry, using bazooka teams for close shots while Shermans covered them. Artillery called in timed strikes that broke optics, tracks, and exposed crew even when shells could not pierce armor. When the weather lifted, air power smashed German armor on narrow approach roads. The bulge ended with German armored forces shattered, having lost tanks and crews that could not be replaced. By early 1945, the Allied advantage was clear. American and British forces were preparing to cross the Rhine. Soviet armies pressed from the east after huge winter offensives. German industry was breaking apart under bombing, loss of resources, and shortages of fuel and tungsten. Panther production, which had peaked around 3,900 in 1944, dropped sharply in early 1945 as factories were hit, transport broke down, and materials ran short. Even when Panthers were built, many could not move for lack of fuel. Crews often abandoned tanks not because of battle damage, but because they had nothing to run them on. HVAP had its own limits that deserve mention. The tungsten-core, while very hard, was brittle. Below certain impact speeds, roughly around to 300 to 2,500 feet per second, the core could shatter on impact. This meant HVAP was much less effective at longer ranges where speed had fallen. Against the Panther's mantlet, the practical effective range was around 1,000 meters. Beyond that, cores were more likely to break or bounce. American crews learned these truths in combat, sometimes the hard way. Some wasted precious HVAP firing at Panthers too far away, drawing return fire from guns that still worked well at long range. Training on HVAP often lagged because the ammo reached units before formal guides did. Many crews learned by trial in real fights. One example was Sergeant Francis Baker on November 20th, 1944. His Sherman with a 76mm gun fired at a Panther at around 800 yards. He shot at least 7 times and saw several hits on the Panther's side, but the rounds bounced due to angle and slope. The Panther pulled back rather than keep fighting. It was not a total failure. Withdrawal is a form of success, but it taught crews that HVAP was not magic. Good tactics, careful aim, proper range, and smart angles still mattered. Post-war studies confirmed both HVAP's strengths and its limits. Against the Panther's mantlet up to about 1,000 meters, HVAP worked well when hits were on target, often causing catastrophic damage inside. Against the heavily sloped front plate, results were poor except at very close ranges and lucky angles. High speed plus extreme slope often meant ricochet or core shatter. Shermans still needed to maneuver for better angles, especially flanking shots. The ammo did not make Shermans equal to Panthers, but it gave them a real chance when before there was almost none from the front. The Korean War, starting in June 1950, offered another test. American Shermans, now often the M for a 3.8 with 76mm guns, fought Soviet-made T-30 485s, unlike Europe, where HVAP was very scarce. In 1950, tungsten stocks were available and supply was not a major limit. US crews in Korea found that HVAP could easily penetrate T-3 for 85 armor at normal combat ranges. The T-30-485, while dangerous, had weaker protection than the Panther. Its turret front at around 90 millimeters and its front glacis at about 45 millimeters could not stop tungsten-core rounds from 76 millimeters guns at typical distances. Shermans in Korea achieved very favorable exchange ratios, helped by strong crew training and plentiful HVAP. For veterans of Europe, this was bittersweet. The ammo that was limited when they needed it most was widely available later, and proved as effective as hoped. German views gathered after the war through interviews and captured documents showed professional respect and deep frustration. German ordnance experts admitted that American industry sold tungsten-core ammo production better than Germany did, even though Germany had pioneered similar ideas. German PZG 40 rounds existed, but production was always too small. By late 1944, American output, despite its own shortages, was still beyond what Germany could match. German tankers often mentioned the new American ammunition as a key factor that made their job harder, knowing that Shermans could penetrate the mantlet at combat ranges meant they could not trust frontal armor alone. This forced more careful tactics, slower movement, and reliance on defense. But defense gave the initiative to the Allies, who excelled at combined arms. The psychological loss of invulnerable armor pushed German armored operations into a more cautious, defensive posture in 1945. Technical study of HVAP fragments from wrecks showed German engineers exactly how the American rounds worked. The tungsten core with light carrier sections used scarce materials efficiently, maximizing penetration while minimizing tungsten per round. The light body allowed higher speed without excessive barrel wear, and the dense core kept energy well over distance compared to steel. German engineers understood the benefits, but lacked the materials and factory capacity to respond. By late 1944, German production focused on simply maintaining output of existing designs under bombing, not inventing new ammo types. The Panther's KWK-40 to 75 millimeters gun already had excellent penetration against Allied tanks with standard rounds, so making better German ammo was not the top priority. New tungsten rounds would require tungsten. Germany did not have, and retooling factories that were already under attack. As a result, German tanks in the final year mostly used ammunition developed earlier in the war. While American ammo improved through late 1944 and 1945, the historical meaning of Aracourt goes beyond the day's kill counts. It proved that American doctrine, mobility, combined arms, logistics, and mass could beat German methods that leaned heavily on superior individual tank performance. German commanders in 1940 built panzer brigades around the Panther's technical strengths, believing armor and firepower would make up for weak training and limited support. That belief failed. The lesson was clear to all observers: technology matters, but operational excellence, logistics, and training matter more. HVAP's effect on crews also deserves attention. For US tankers who had faced Panthers with only standard shells in Normandy, HVAP gave hope. It did not remove the Panther threat, but it offered a fair shot at success under the right conditions. That boost in confidence led to better performance and more aggressive, smart tactics. For German tankers, realizing that American tanks could now threaten them frontally changed everything. Otto Kriess, a famous German tank ace, wrote about how confidence in thick armor fueled aggressive tactics. When that confidence eroded, performance suffered. Panther crews who understood their mantlet could be pierced became more cautious and less willing to take risks. The broader implications of HVAP point to a larger truth about modern war. Both sides often have good scientists and good designs, but the side with stronger industry and resources can turn ideas into battlefield outcomes. Both the US and Germany knew tungsten-core ammo could work, and both built functioning designs. The difference was scale. The US could produce enough to matter, even if not enough to fully equip every unit. Germany could not. This pattern repeated across many systems. Germany built sophisticated weapons, but too few of them. The US built simpler, reliable gear in huge numbers and kept improving it. The Sherman was not the best tank by pure technical metrics, but the US made about 49,324 of them versus about 130 to Panthers, roughly an 8-to-1 ratio, while adding improvements like HVAP to close gaps. Where it counted, that combination won wars. The careers of Aracourt veterans show how those lessons lived on. Lieutenant Colonel Creighton Abrams, who led the 37th Tank Battalion there, later became Army Chief of Staff and lent his name to the M1 Abrams. His experiences reinforced the value of combined arms, crew training, and having the right ammunition. The M1 was built with a powerful 120mm gun and advanced rounds, including dense penetrators with the same basic purpose HVAP had. German veterans who later helped build the West German Army drew their own lessons. They had seen that superior technology without logistics and industry behind it is not enough. Cold War doctrine stressed quality and training, and also the importance of ammunition design. The Leopard 1 and Leopard 2 would use ammunition shaped by the insight that ammo and training are as crucial as armor thickness. Germany's surrender on May 8, 1945 ended the urgent need for HVAP against Panthers. US Ordnance officers studying wrecks found clear HVAP hits on some Panthers, confirming effectiveness against the mantlet and turret face at good angles, and rare penetrations on the heavily sloped glacis. This matched the doctrine that emphasized maneuver and flanking for better shots. The full post-war analysis concluded that while HVAP made a meaningful difference, the decisive factors were numbers, logistics, air power, artillery, and sound operational practice. The change in American tank crews from mid-1944 to early 1945 reflected combat experience, better training, more 76mm Shermans, and growing familiarity with HVAP. Units that had been nervous in June 1944 became confident by early 1945. Confidence led to faster decisions, smarter risks, and better use of openings. HVAP did not cause this transformation alone, but it helped. Its legacy continues in modern tank ammo. Since 1945, U.S. armor has treated ammunition technology as central to tank design. Modern rounds use depleted uranium or tungsten alloys. For the same reasons tungsten carbide worked in World War II: density and hardness. The core idea has not changed. Focus great kinetic energy into a small, very dense penetrator at high speed. From 1940 for HVAP to today's fin-stabilized, discarding sabot rounds, the line is direct. Soviet and later Russian designs followed similar paths, recognizing that material properties and velocity are key to beating armor. The modern tank ammunition industry has roots in the HVAP experience, where engineers proved that specialized ammo could offset armor advantages. On September 19, 1944, when Lieutenant Men Sherman crew first used HVAP against Panthers at Aracourt, the psychological balance in armored warfare shifted. German crews who trusted their frontal armor learned it could be beaten. American crews who felt outgunned gained real confidence, knowing they had a tool that could win under the right conditions. That change in mindset, powered by tungsten-core ammunition made in American factories, affected every armored fight in the European war afterward. HVAP was never available in the ideal numbers, but it was available enough to help turn uncertain defenders into confident attackers, willing to take the fight to German armor. The crews who fired those first rounds, watching tungsten cores punch through what had seemed invincible steel, showed that smart use of materials and industrial strength could overcome daunting technical disadvantages. That lesson learned at great cost across Europe remains relevant for anyone planning for modern war. Today,